evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bluddworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I'm going to be delving into Master of the Game by Gygax. And as you can see, this book is dealing with the principles and techniques for becoming an expert role-playing game master. So part one, I'm just going to split the chapter of what is a master game master and who can become one. And I'm just going to deal with what is a master game master first. Obviously, Gygax had varying levels of being a game master. So he had master game master, then he had even a grand master game master. So I'm really looking forward to delving into and seeing how he laid out the way that you would recognize, a master game master from a grand master game master and so on. So, and perhaps some of that was a little bit tongue-in-cheek as well. But I think the key is that Gygax is talking about the technical aspects of the game, the principles and techniques of actually running the table, all right, as a game master. He isn't necessarily talking about game mastery, where you are gaining and demonstrating an expertise in doing it, at least not initially. Maybe that's where the Grand Master, Game Master comes in. But initially he's talking about you as a Game Master just performing the roles that he identifies. And I will certainly go into that in more detail. The other thing that I find, amazing is the fact that he's talking Game Master. He is not talking about a Dungeon Master, at least not initially. So we'll look for that transition when he does, or if he does, going through this book as well. So this is my first really in-depth look at it. I've read through the first section of the of the book. It took me quite a while to find this, and I just want to show that off. So I picked this up quite a few months ago. Paid $80 for it. It's usually well over $100, so I still consider it to be one of my great finds on eBay, and it's really in super great condition. So I'm going to I'm certainly going to preserve that and go through the PDF, which I found online. So without further ado, let's start taking a look at the PDF. And again, I'm only going to focus on the very beginning of it. So let me switch views here, and I'm going to have to do a few little clicks to make sure that we are in fact looking at it. So what is a master game master, and who can become one? So what exactly does a master game master do anyway? So this is where he starts it. This is where he focuses it on, and this video is also a response to some other YouTubers out there, which I think seem to kind of muddy the waters as to what is a game master and what is game mastery and so on. So this is really a response to that one particular individual, but there's also another that I think also needs to see what Gary was actually talking about as far as running a game and what is the way to perform your role as a game master as well. So what is a game master? In order for the GM to become better in the role of the chief participant in the activity, he or she must fully comprehend the scope of the position. The game master is required to perform many tasks and play many roles in every role-playing game. These forms of participation fall into two general classes. First, the game master is the principal figure involved in the play of the game. Second, but of scarcely less importance, the game master is the supporting force behind the player group. By way of explanation, let's break down the GM's responsibilities into all of its parts. The Game Master has at least 7 principal functions which are intrinsically connected to the game, its principles and rules, and the technical aspects of play. These functions are as moving force, creator, designer, arbiter, overseer, director, umpire, referee, or judge, whichever one you prefer. A single function with varying shades of meaning. So an umpire, a referee, and a judge do have a variation, but I would technically probably go more for referee or judge rather than umpire. The secondary functions of a Game Master are narrator, interpreter, force of nature, personification of non-participant characters, all other personifications, and the supernatural power. Following is a description of each of these functions. The moving force. The game has many participants, and the GM is the crucial figure amongst the 3 or more players who make up the group. While the game itself might be bad or good, the play of the game system is only as good as the ability of the GM to understand and present it. Thus, a moving force. The GM is responsible for mustering the players, that means bringing them to the table, and inspiring continued vitality. In other words, keeping them engaged and interested in continuing to play. For instance, as the instigator of play, the GM may recruit players for the game or guide an already existing group towards a game or system of his own choosing. The greatest threat to the vitality of the gaming group is familiarity and repetition of play, coupled with changes in the player group such as relocation, the pull of other interests, and scholastic or occupational demands. So he's really talking about the biggest threat to a long-term playing group are those particular factors. These factors can all lead to stagnation or the dissolution of the group, often without continued revitalization from the Game Master. Even the most vigorous efforts at the onset to inspire participation soon fade within the players. As a moving force, the GM initiates and sustains play by inspiring, encouraging, and maintaining vitality and creative energy. In other words, the GM is really responsible for keeping the group interested and engaged in not just a one-session thing, but over a prolonged period of time. And to be responsive if there are any changes in the group, or to be responsive if the group seems to be stagnating. So even if the group does stay together, but if they start feeling like there's stagnation, whether it's the game system they're starting to get bored with, or potentially the campaign that they're running starts becoming boring to them, or whatever, that's where the Game Master really should kind of become that, or reinvigorate that moving force aspect of their role. Creator. The word may seem inappropriate. After all, the publisher of the RPG system creates, and the GM merely follows. Right? Wrong. At the very least, the Game Master creates a living realism and interest in the game. Do you as a GM devise adventure scenarios for the player group? If so, you are creating a portion of the system. Did you create a campaign, that is, a whole or portion of a whole world with geography, climate, weather, nations, politics, economics, population, flora, fauna, and so on, in which the player participants use their game participants for many and varied adventurous interactions. If so, you have created a major portion of the game system. Perhaps you took a system and rules and modified them to suit a subgenre or a whole new milieu, such as going from fantasy to science fiction, or stepping from a modern espionage to future espionage. That approach, that might be called grand creation, a few more changes, and what is the end product is most probably a new and unique game system. Whatever the case, the game master is creator in one critical sense. He or she creates and continues to recreate the tenor and the excitement of what the RPG is. The sense of fantasy, wonder, mystery, suspense, danger, and all the rest are created by the game master. When excellence of game meshes with that of the game master, truly enthralling interaction occurs for all participants. The mark of a master game master, however, is the ability to create fun and excitement out of an inferior, incomplete, or faulty game system. So basically Gary is saying that if you're a really, really good game master, you can take any system and create something that is enthralling, interactive, and fun for the player group to engage in. Designer. So yet another role. Related to but differing from the role of creator, the game master is required to design and develop rules, subcases, bridging rules, rules expansions, new rules, and possibly subsystems and systems within the overall RPG system. He's basically talking about house rules and homebrews and such. As the participant most knowledgeable about the play group, the play method, campaign, and game system employed, the GM must be skilled in game design. Even the most developed and expansive game system cannot cover everything. The human imagination is too fertile. There are too many unknowns for the whole concept of role-playing as a game form is too new, and the personalities of the individuals playing too varied. A superior game master devises material as needed, while the one who is a true master game master does so with the benefit of assistance from his player group. All right, so there you see a kind of a differentiation between a superior game master who devises material as needed, while the one who is a true master game master does so with the benefit of the assistance from his player group. In other words, if you include your players in some of that creative energy in developing your game and your world and so on, that is the mark of a true master. Designing efforts prolong the viability of the game because they not only complete the RPG system, but tailor it to the tastes of the participants involved. Arbiter. Who but the game master is in the position to interpret the spirit, principles, system of rules, and individual game laws, rules correctly? Who is more able to answer questions more ably than the master game master, who determines the answers for his or her own player group or game? No one. Certainly, some players may consider the publisher and possibly author and designer to be such a final authority. However, neither the publisher nor the author-designer controls and serves as the moving force behind the play group headed by the game master. Therefore, what they have to say has no ultimate bearing upon the rule of the game master. All that really matters is that the game master has the option to accept or agree with certain rulings, whether offered by an outside agency or generated within the play group. Being the arbiter is a heavy responsibility, for the success of the group is directly related to the game master's ability to perform this role. Remember that success may be measured by the group's long-term participation and enjoyment of the RPG. I have personally stood before assembled GMs and players pronouncing rules, interpretations, and applying principles, and explaining the systems used in the AD&D game. They received the benefit of my thinking and opinions along with a cautionary note. In the final analysis, you must decide for yourselves what rules you will use. If you employ rules or systems which are different than those put forth in the published game, make certain that all participants know this and understand the differences, then have fun. Because Game Master and Playgroup might well interact in situations which utilize the standard systems as opposed to the variant ones normally employed in play involving only the group unit, it is useful to know the standard or tournament rules. But house rules are fine, and the GM is the one who will set them down for the others. Next role, the Overseer. Along the way, the Game Master reads and knows the rules, the milieu, and the specific setting for the session of play. How does the session of play relate to the adventure scenario to the epic, and the epic to the campaign? The Game Master must oversee the coordination of the game within the action of play and the needs of the group to make sure that the longevity and fun of the campaign agree with the systems and the scenarios at use now and in the future. It might be very enjoyable to reward a group of players for success in a single episode, but that elation will be short-lived, of course, for there is then little purpose in continuing. Expectations must not be continually unattained, but neither must they be continually exceeded. This applies to the internal logic of the RPG world, the campaign milieu, and the particular setting in play. Overseeing with an eye towards balancing these factors can be quite demanding. However, the Game Master will achieve a greater degree of success more frequently than will any less accomplished GM, because he or she knows and understands all of the positions that must be fulfilled and the tasks which need accomplishing. Director. Playing an RPG is very similar to doing an improvisational theater. Although the players most frequently improvise the actions of their established character, they must frequently shift gears and pretend they are not that persona at all, but an entirely different one. In order to slip by the gate guards, says Joan, whose character is a warrior maid, I'll have Darcy, her character, pretend to be a peasant girl leaving the city with the others at the close of the market day, and think of the games of espionage, mystery, and the like, where it is the rule rather than the exception when a game character plays other personas. So here he's actually talking about you're the player playing a character, and the character is trying to portray something different than themselves. It's kind of like Tropic Thunder. I'm the dude playing the dude that thinks he's the other dude. That's basically what you're doing here, or what Gary is saying, that sometimes player characters have to act like other characters, and that's something that's really something I've never considered before in doing a persona within a persona attached to your own self. The broad outlines of the play are known to the GM and the player group. Then, with the direction from the Game Master and their player character's interaction within the setting, the group developed their own version of the scenario being played. At the very least, the GM gives cues which the actors may follow. Often, the role of the director is so well managed that the whole tenor of the adventure raises itself to epic proportions, whether dramatic, tragic, or comedic, as players respond to the artistry and the challenge of the master game master. Direction extends from the broad to the specific. However, in that, the GM does very mundane things as director. Because this is a game, the make-believe characters participating in the adventure do not have any senses of their own. Because there is no reality involved, there is nothing in the scenario to be tasted, touched, seen, smelled, or heard anyway. Yet all of these five senses, and often the fabled sixth sense, too function in the RPG because the Game Master provides this information to the players in their game personas. Thus, he or she may direct them by relaying sensory information. There is a slick wetness to the cobblestones, and your boot heels echo between the jagged edges of the buildings, says the GM in setting the scene. The scent of the salt water is heavy in the air, and you shiver suddenly, although it is not that cool of a night. Then from the corner of your eye you see the flash of the red again. Beyond that, there is a direction of voice, stress, expression, body language, and all the rest. Because there is no set script to follow, no right way, as determined by anyone, direction at its best is a combination of thoroughness and subtlety, which is mostly undetectable to the outsider. The role of umpire, referee, and judge. This threefold function places the Master GM in a more personal role in game proceedings. While the role of arbiter is vital to the regulatory supervision, this function focuses on the Master GM as a person who must deal with players as an individual human beings while maintaining the standards and integrity of the game as a whole. Because the player characters interact with the game system and the scenarios based upon it, they do require some supervision. Since only the Game Master can know the motives, thoughts, plans, purposes, and actions, reactions of the sentient creatures and beasts encountered during the course of an adventure episode, he or she must deliver the final word on all disputes. The umpire role is not a biased one. The Game Master must serve as sole decision maker within respect to actions within the scenario, combats, and all the rest of what occurs where activity requires determination of results. Various dice rolls called for by the rules may determine success or failure on some occasions, but often some activity not anticipated by the systems and rules will be initiated. As umpire, the GM's rule should consider only the facts and resulting circumstances, whether as probability results expressed by the random number generation or arguments of fact and logic. The referee role is very similar to that of umpire, but the focus is on disputes or hostile player-character interaction. Let us suppose that in the paranoia game, Slippery wants to substitute a dud energy cell for the weapon carried by Bossy Jerk. The activity involved would fall into the umpire category, but a resulting dispute later within Slippery and Bossy Jerk deal directly with one another is very much the purview of the referee. The game master must handle these types of interactions in an impartial and judicial manner. The game master also determines rewards for character performance in adventure scenarios. This role of judge does not normally extend to the division of the spoils taken during the course of the play. If there is a dispute there, it is the referee who intercedes. But in this last capacity of game master comments on the strengths and weaknesses of each character's play and gives each player character the awards and honors he or she sees fit. In some game systems, this might mean the distribution of points towards an increase in professional skills or personal statistics, or an increase in rank level or other such status. Going back to Slippery and in the paranoia example, that character's assumption of the team leader role after the demise of Bossy Jerk, plus a further successful discovery of the common mutant traitor, might result in the awarding of several skill points and a promotion from red to orange status for Slip, ruining a perfectly good name in the process. Slippery doesn't quite cut it, but there's progress for you. The function of judge is a very important one for the action of the GM in the capacity in a measure of his or her overall skill. Too few or too many awards will be seen as a sign of weakness or that the GM is being unfair or showing favoritism. Player participants do their own judging, of course, and the game master is rated continually throughout the course of the activity, but never so critically as in the case when he or she serves as judge at the conclusion of an adventure scenario. Be sure you understand these principal functions of a GM before you read on. The secondary functions are very closely related to the primary ones and usually occur simultaneously. The main difference between the 7 primary and the 6 secondary functions is that another individual or individuals could function in each of the secondary roles in place of the game master, with no loss of continuity in the campaign or scenario. Let us examine each of the secondary functions and determine how the responsibility for these tasks might be removed from the game master. Narrator. Whether the information is from prepared text or otherwise, the role of narrator is integral to any RPG and is adjunctive to the duty of director, dramatic, clear, and exciting narration builds much of the mystique of the game. Commercially prepared adventure scenarios and those which the GM has written himself will have portions which are to be read aloud to the player participants. In other cases, the GM might relate material directly from his own notes or spontaneously off the top of his head, having been inspired by player actions. This aspect of the narrator is closer to improvisational theatrical work. The interpreter. Both expansion and clarification of the rules fall into the interpretive category of game interaction. Questions which might be forthcoming are often anticipated by the astute game master. Actual questions are also interpreted in a neutral, absolutely disinterested fashion. Have we ever seen such a device, monster, phenomenon, etc. before? One player might ask. The GM is cognizant of exactly what the player characters are experiencing, but because he or she is also aware of the limitations of the situation, the answer will be clear but couched in terms which require the player to rely only on the information known to his or her game persona. Do you recall anything similar? The game master might respond, "You note that now." And here the GM reiterates previous material, possibly augmenting it in the consideration of the question asked. Merely relating text or extemporaneous material or giving sensory data will not serve when the play group requests additional information regarding such information. Therefore, additional interpretive input given in response to the query is likely to be more helpful and realistic when supplied by a secondary game master, for each of the player's personas is individual and has different perspectives and variable abilities. So here he's talking about allowing the players to add some of their own answers to that question. Two sources will vary, and this aids in reproducing a more realistic variation in comprehension and interpretation of data, allowing the players to judge which information will serve them better. Force of nature. Set occurrences become interesting facts of RPG play in the mature campaign. Rain, snow, heat, cold, avalanche, landslide, earthquake, fire, hurricanes, tornadoes, and so on and so forth. Yet the more prosaic events are also of major importance. What about the passage of time, the direction and strength of any wind blowing, and so on and so forth? So they're talking about the game master is the force of nature. The game master controls the weather and the brightness and the darkness and the temperature and everything involving the environment that the player characters are functioning within. Serving as the force of nature is very much the role of record keeping and random event occurrences. It is critically important to the play of an RPG, too often neglected and usually done by the whim or guess. The secondary GM is ideally suited to fulfill this function, and computer assistance for the game master or a segregate is most useful here too. So again, he's talking about sharing the responsibilities, delegating to another player at the table to handle the force of nature role. Personification. The three remaining secondary areas of duty can be discussed as if they were one category. The game master must remember to differentiate them mentally, but the tasks are basically the same. NPCs are played according to their individual professions, knowledge, skills, characteristics, ethics, and motives. Each such NPC must be role-played very carefully and dispassionately as far as the game master is concerned, yet not necessarily as far as the persona is considered. That what constitutes the sum of the NPC character must be reflected in play disinterestedly but faithfully by the GM. Ally, antagonist, beggar, king, no matter, the play must suit the character and the setting. The same is very much true for the personification of the hungry rat, the sly and evil dragon, a sentient computer, a swarm of angry bees, or whatever. These are the other personifications the GM must represent, whether the encountered persona is a talking mirror, an intelligent plant, or anything else. The game master assumes the role as needed and depicts the persona as best he or she is able to. Finally, the supernatural power role is likewise handled. It is the most demanding because of the implied potential of the persona, whether it is good, evil, or neutral, outweighing the force of the player characters in whole, in part, or singularly. Deities, mythic creatures, and similar beings of great power require correct interaction, impartial interpretation, and dramatic representation, just as these presentation abilities are necessary in the two other portions of personification. It is obvious that a co-GM or assistant GM is highly desirable when many such roles are needed during the course of play. Although the 3 personification interactions are given last, such activity is, in truth, very possibly the most important part of dramatizing play, for such personifications occurs regularly and frequently. The game master and an understudy or protege or peer shows no less than a quarter of his or her ability in this manner. It is evident that the game master is not a party outside the role-playing arena. The game master is not a mere reader or keeper of rules. He is the principal force that motivates all other participants in the RPG experience, builds their interest, sustains it, heightens the dramatic realism of the play, and actively participates in the course of the game. The game master is the power above all other powers in the game and sole and final arbiter. He or she is also everything else in the whole entire universe of the campaign, which is not played or represented by the player participant. A master game master can bring about the elevation of poor and mediocre players far more easily than can a group of player participants improve the ability of an inept game master. All right, so basically, a really good game master can elevate players, whereas really good players may not elevate a game master. The game is only as good as its game master in role-playing, and that demands far greater skills than are called for to demonstrate masterful playing ability as a player persona. Yet the master game master must by definition also remain a disinterested party. Being disinterested does not mean being aloof. It does mean being impartial, active in all aspects of the participation to some degree, and very much sharing in the triumphs and tragedies of the character group after the conclusion of play. That describes the game master in an RPG. He or she is one half of the whole, whether serving as an individual or with one or more co-workers in the GM role. The play group might number 2 or 20, but this number never outweighs the other half. The game master is truly the critical element in role-playing. He or she contributes to the game and its play thereafter, while the players are concerned only with the performance of their characters. So, what is a game master? A master game master? The answer is simple. The master game master is one who performs all of the manifold functions noted fully, completely, and in such a manner as to bring the maximum excitement and enjoyment to his players group and to himself and herself as the principal participant in the game. So there you have it. I know that's a whole lot, and we can keep on going back over and over that again. If you do not have this book or access to a PDF for it, I really do recommend that you pick it up, and you can see where he's really talking about being a master of knowing how to fill those roles as the game master, as opposed to mastery, where that really doesn't come into play until he starts to differentiate the master game master. You know, so first you're going to be a game master. You're going to start out, you're going to start to learn how to effectively fill the role of a game master. And then as you're developing in those techniques and principles, and you're demonstrating them, and you're better utilizing them, and part of that is delegating. Once you really learn how to start to delegate some of those secondary functions, then that's at the point when you're becoming a really skilled master game master. So, and like I said, later on he's going to probably talk about the Grand Master Game Master. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to stop this here at this point. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments that you want to make about, what I just read through and focus, and I can go back and do a follow-up video, or at least respond to your comment in the comment section, and pull up the section again and talk specifically to that. Feel free to leave your comments in there, because I really would love to get a dialogue going on this. I'd also like to tackle this as a subject that I do on a live stream, where I'll invite some other game masters that can come in, and we can really just sit down and talk about this here, and see how others also interpret some of this, because I did editorialize a little bit some of the different areas and express what I thought about it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you might think about it as well. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Certainly share it. I usually forget to ask you to share this video. Please share this video. If you have a DM that you're currently playing for, and bring his or her attention to this book and to this discussion. I would love to meet other game masters, like I said, that I already have contact with, and would love to talk to you about what this had to say about the principles and techniques for becoming an expert role-playing game master. So once again, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your weekend, the rest of the week, and I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. Take care.